Hello and welcome to this episode of the F Word and Friends. And today with me, I've got Ruvan and I've got Pierre. And today we're chatting about something that really gets my blood boiling. Something that is probably the most selfish thing you can do. And that is passing away without a will. And unfortunately, I've had the experience now of the displeasure of working with an interstate will. And maybe if we can just chat about that and the dangers regarding that. And I think the biggest thing is what is holding people back from just getting a will, because for us, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so I think everyone wants a will. Where there's a will, there's a way. But normally,
where there's a will, there's a queue.
There's a queue. But I think it's one of those things. It's important, but it's not urgent. Because no one plans to pass away tomorrow. And it feels like not nice to talk about it. So I think it's something you say you're going to do it later. And sometimes it's difficult because you have to put in guardians, or you have to say, okay, I'm not going to give my wife everything I want them to go to there. So there's difficult discussions to have around it. So I think that's why it's an uncomfortable situation. And that's normally why they don't do that.
Yeah, so I also think people overthink. I've seen wills and working on estates where I am the executor. You see a will that's really, really intricate, and it might not really have been the best thing to do. It becomes really, really difficult and not always, practical for an executor. So I think people overthink everything that they put into the will, everything that should go to someone, which is something small. My brother can have the small figurine in my room. Yeah. Don't do that. It doesn't matter. So there's a lot of intricate things that really should not be as difficult as it should be, and I think that's why people always sort of postpone it. Absolutely.
Yeah, keep it simple, stupid. So I was normally under the impression, luckily there's the interstate succession that will cover you if you don't have a will, but like you have no practical experience around it. Why would you say someone has to have a will?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things is people think everything's just going to my wife. Okay, it's fine, I don't need a will, everything's going to my wife. It becomes a lot more intricate when you've got children that are involved, all right? Especially underage children under the age of 18. Because the Interstate Succession Act, in essence, says it needs to be divided by your wife and with your kids. But now, if there's not a testamentary trust, where there won't be one because you don't have a will, now all of a sudden, you've got the guardian's trust that you need to work with, which is in itself a nightmare. And you've also got a little story about the guardian's trust and how difficult it is working with them.
Yeah, like listen, my grandmother, sweet, bless her soul, she said like me and my brother and everyone's got to inherit like 20,000 rand. So it's great, but we were minors at this. That's and they lived in KwaZulu-Natal. In the end, I've got the same names as my cousin, and in the end, we had to drive all the way to Pietermaritzburg one day, in and out again, to stand in the queue for the Guardians Fund to get the 20,000 rand just out of the fund because they couldn't, the paperwork and the admin nightmare. So yeah, you don't want, if you can, avoid it, because we know it's just the extra layer with the government, and it's going to take a long time to get the money out.
Yeah, so also think about this, right? So now the estate gets, divided between your wife and the children. But the problem is now, you as wife or husband, you need to go to the Guardian's Trust and apply the whole time. I need maintenance for my child, for school, for medical aid, for food, all that stuff. It becomes a huge issue. You have to go stand in lines, all that stuff. So when you don't have these things in place, that's why I say it's the most selfish thing that you can do, because you're not there anymore. Okay? It's not your problem. But if you really care about your wife and your kids and their longevity and making life easier, not harder for them, after you've passed away, that is a big thing, because your wife or husband, they're grieving at that stage. They don't want to worry about these assets are all of a sudden going to the government, or how much am I getting, stuff like that. So
What does happen to the home?
Immovable property, because that's going to be difficult. If it needs to go to the guardian's fund, and your wife stays in the house, but all of a sudden the kids inherited a part of the immovable property that's now in the guardian's fund. I mean, how does that work?
yeah, so first of all, if we've got any attorneys, conveyancing attorneys, please give us a comment below. But what's happened in this case is the spouse was co-owner of the home, and there's still a bond, outstanding bond on the home. And this bond needs to be fully settled first before it can be transferred. And then they need to put in a caveat in the transferring of the home that when the minor becomes to age of 18, then they can, sell the home or whatever it may be. But now you're setting, let's say the child is 10 years old, you need to wait another 8 years before you can sell that house.
And what if there's a cash flow issue and the house needs to be sold?
And yet again, so now it's interstate, and if your beneficiary nominations aren't right, now all of a sudden you're sitting with liquidity issues as well, because the spouse that's left behind may not be able to pay off the home to settle that bond. So that's why it's so important to, first of all, chat with someone. Just have a chat with a professional to ask the question, why is it important for me to have a will? Because I think one of the common misconceptions is everything's going to my wife or everything's going to my kids. But you don't understand the intricacies and practically how that will work when you pass away.
No, and of course, not just talking about the testamentary trust, but also the election of guardians for your children.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really, really emotional thing to think about. And it's your last will. How do you then know that your kids are actually in good hands? They probably will be. We are all good people. But how do you actually know that they will be in good hands and they'll be looked after? The only way you'll know is if you've elected those people. And the only way to do it is through your will.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And all these things you said about, my little figurine needs to go to my brother or sister or whatever. We've seen a lot now that sometimes this just keeps the process on hold. People don't want to make that decision. So at the end of the day, it doesn't become important or urgent anymore. And then they just decide to give up on the whole process, especially when it comes to guardianship as well. So I always tell my clients, make a decision on that, even if it's the wrong decision. You can always change it tomorrow. You can always come back to me or to an attorney and say, listen, I think I've made a mistake with my will.
But at least you've done something.
But at least I've done something. So make a decision, even if it's the wrong decision. And it sounds very weird, but at least they won't, because it's going to be a very big mess if you just leave it.
Can you leave out the guardianship? It's still probably better than just to have a will and say everything goes to my wife. And if both of us pass away, that's normally 90%. It's not advice. 90% of the wills we find, it's like everything goes to the spouse, and then got to be separated between the children. And then normally, if they're not 21 or 25, there will be a testamentary trust.
Yeah.
So
I've seen wills without guardians.
Yeah, me
before.
too.
So again, it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
It's better than nothing. The testamentary trust is the big thing, right?
absolutely.
And you spoke about the 90% and 10%. Another thing that, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, on your beneficiary nomination forms with your life cover, even with your pension funds or your retirement annuities, I see a lot of times where the wife is in there and the two children are in there. Now, with your life insurance, that becomes also a little bit of an issue.
Absolutely.
Because now the wife gets, let's say, 60% and the two kids get 20% and 20%. That goes to the guardian's trust. and the wife sits with 60%, and because there hasn't been any planning done, now the wife may sit, or the husband may sit with liquidity problems.
Absolutely.
Where they can't
Have to use that money. Yeah.
where they can't pay off the home. So I think the biggest thing for us, or the point that we want to bring across, is speak with someone about this. It's never a fun conversation to talk about death, right? But it will happen, death and taxes.
Yeah. So and even we said, like you said, you talk to a professional, but it doesn't necessarily, you have to appoint a professional, the executor or a lawyer. You can even have your own will. Just Google, there's a few things that needs to be in a will, like the beneficiaries can't sign it and stuff like that. Just have something in place. Even if you're on your own, a valid will, make sure what's a valid will.
Yeah.
But you can say the executor is my brother, and then they will sort of, but still, I will, you can say a brother, but if your brother don't know anything about it, normally you do one will, one estate. All of us will do that. You do one estate, you're the executor, and you say, never again. I think everyone feels the same. So, and we are in the industry. Imagine your brother that's in
Doesn't know
IT,
anything.
doesn't want to do this.
Actually, let's quickly talk about that, because I think that's a very important misconception as well.
Sorry, that's why you also want to do a will, because you can nominate the executor.
Yeah,
That's also
of course,
important.
of course. Executor.
Yeah.
People think winding up an estate is an easy process.
No.
Okay, and Ruvan, you've had now 1 or 2 estates that you've done. I think it's maybe take us through that whole process of how it works, what happens with the assets, with the letters of executorship, why that is important to have that. Maybe just take us through that, because people think, okay, I'm just going to put Yanni, but because it's an easy process, but it's not.
Yanni will need to go to the master.
Sorry, and people want to know, some people aren't buried yet, and they want to know, when can we expect the money?
Oh, yes.
So it's different on beneficiary nominations, but if it goes into will, money in the bank, you're going to wait a while.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to
Yeah,
know that.
that's where estate planning is of course important. Yeah, I think that the thing that people don't realize is it does take long. Doesn't matter what you do. If in the past we've been moaning about the master's office and the delays at the master's office and so forth, but it's not just the master's office. There is so many moving parts, bank accounts, investments, life insurance. It is really, really, really intricate. And of course the executor needs to set up the L&D account, and that needs to go to the master to be signed off. Now the point, of course, for an executor is to make sure that the client's assets comes back to zero. So zero liabilities and zero assets. Everything should be at zero at the end of the day. But it does really become quite difficult. And there's so many things that happen in different stages.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't come at once. And sometimes you get a bit of a surprise now and then, maybe a liability that you didn't know about, or a debtor that comes up, or somewhere, maybe a medical account or something. But it is really difficult. And I think it's important to remember as well that there's many laws, and some of these laws, I promise you would never even think about it. And then one day this happens to you and you're the executor of your sister's estate and you have no idea what to do. Luckily then you can go to a lawyer or
agent,
and you make them the agent of the estate. But it's really difficult. It's not a easy process. It's not a quick process. And the thing you must always remember, the money that goes into the estate, or any assets that form part of the estate, 90% of the time, that assets will not be distributed before the estate is finalized. So any beneficiaries, may it be kids or your wife or husband, they will not have access to funds unless you've planned for it. It's something that is out of your spouse's estate. So the planning is very, very important, and it can take long. It can take 6 months. It can take a year. It can take 2 years. I've seen estates that my wife has worked on, new estates that they've opened out of the 80s, that they've reopened there's it can be really, really difficult. So be careful.
Yeah, so I think everyone see the asset side. Oh, there's investments, there's money,
Yeah.
and they want to have their hands on that, but they don't see the cost or the liability side. All the creditors that's coming
Absolutely.
for the estate, and you have to, as executive, take that into account. They can't distribute the money because we still have SARS because your
100%.
brother didn't have tax returns for the
Yeah.
last 10 years. So, and you have to check all those things. So,
Yeah.
if you are inheriting money, don't plan on it getting it soon. So I think that's the thing that you want to know about that.
Yeah. So I think the two biggest points around, or our two biggest discussion points here are:
Have a will.
have a will. One, you don't have to pay these days to have a will drafted. There are many, many companies that will do a free will for you. So have a will in place and make sure that you get an executor, a proper professional executor that will be able to finalize the estate.
And don't be greedy in a hurry.
And don't be greedy in a hurry. Thank you so much, lads.
Thanks.
I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions or comments, please comment below.